Now, look at the similarity here between what happened in the Cuban Missile Crisis. Khrushchev was mad as hell because the United States was putting missiles right up against its border. Putin is mad as hell because NATO is coming right up to his border. And NATO is not, in Putin's experience, a defensive organization. It's an offensive organization, and it takes offense, as it did, for example, in the Balkan Wars. And you see what NATO did in the bombing of Serbia, and you'll see that NATO is an interventionist. It is about trying to restructure the world in certain ways. Furthermore, NATO now controls all of Central Europe. And here we come to a crazy geopolitical argument. There's a crazy, well, he wasn't crazy, unfortunately. He was a professor of geography at Oxford University. And there's a man called Halford Mackinder. And Halford Mackinder, back in the early 2000s, right up to about 1942, was writing things about geopolitical strategy on a global level. And his thesis was, whoever controls Central Europe controls the world island, i.e. the whole Eurasian sphere. And whoever controls the world island controls the world. In other words, control of the world depends upon who is controlling the heartland of the system, and the heartland is in Central Europe. Now, the Soviets controlled the heartland throughout the whole period. Now, it is the West that controls the heartland, and the US backed NATO, which is controlling the heartland. And the heartland is threatening the whole control of the Eurasian mass. That is the way in which people think. That's the way in which, Lloyd Austin and the military folk think. This sort of stuff. Now, I actually held a professorship in Oxford, which was called the Halford Mackinder Professorship of Geography. And I mean, on the one hand, I thought that Halford Mackinder would be turning in his grave, think that I held professorship in his name, but I was also extremely embarrassed to have a title of the Halford Mackinder Professor of Geography, because there's this guy who's giving this kind of geopolitical nonsense, and this is terribly important because if people believe it and work on it, then that creates the problem. Actually, in the 1920s, the German geopoliticians, a man called Haushofer, really did believe in this. And much of the expansion of Germany into Eastern Europe and into the Central European area was precisely on Mackinder-type policies. And in the 1920s, General Haushofer was writing about Lebensraum, that is the living space of the German state. And it needed Lebensraum, and it needed to actually control all of Central Europe. And from that control of Central Europe, it could actually organize the world and its strategy of world domination. And Hitler seems to have believed some of this. So part of this was what was going on at that time. My point about all of this is this. We are on the edge of a conflict between NATO and Russia. In fact, a proxy war is being fought in Ukraine. And the United States believes and likes to present itself as somehow or other it is a good country which is simply responding to the desire of the Ukrainians to control their own space and have their own nation and have their own culture and all the rest of it. And that noble, worthy aim is what the United States is about. I demur. I think the United States is using the Ukraine, and is using the Ukraine for the nefarious reason of trying to degrade Russian military capacity to be able to actually, if you like, forward the kind of mission of Western domination of much of the rest of the world. Of course, now the situation is such that you're not only fooling with Russia and all of its missiles, but you're also fooling with China with its major military capacity. And you can see why China, and in China, they think geopolitically too, along the lines I've mentioned. China is actually moving geopolitically through its Belt and Road Initiative and all the rest of it to try to regain some sort of control of what Mackinder called the world island. This is where we are headed at. And the path dependency of this is making me very, very, very nervous. There is danger. And clear danger, and some compromise has to be come to, some sort of, point in which you fold rather than continue. At what point do you kind of say, well, this has gone too far, it's too dangerous? At what point are we going to actually recognize that Putin has actually a genuine, you may not like it, but he has a genuine reason to fear what NATO has been doing and what NATO has been about. And that therefore, one of the answers, which I think should be on the calendar, is the complete demilitarization and denuclearization of the whole of Central Europe. That, it seems to me, is about the only thing that could actually bring Putin to the table. Offer something like that. Say, we will actually accept the denuclearization, the demilitarization of the whole of Central Europe, and we will turn it into a neutral zone so nobody can dominate the world island and do all those kinds of things. This is the kind of thinking which needs to be there. And this is the kind of thinking that got us through the missile crisis in Cuba. The missile crisis in Cuba was a very close thing, and a lot of people were making some very bad decisions around it. I think we are closer to that kind of thing in Ukraine, and a lot of people are making some very bad decisions about it, including the Secretary of Defense, who should have known better than to say that, although I'm glad he did say it, because it gives us an insight into what the true motivation of the United States is